Well, hello everybody. It is just great to have you here. Let me know if you can hear me out there. We did this the other night and it seemed to work, so I think we're okay. But if there's any issues, let me know. We have a wonderful new studio background, and Zeno installed lights today. He's been working on this a little at a time. So now we have this really great color behind me, which is kind of amazing. I would have dressed up if I'd thought of it. But anyhow, Happy New Year. Got all the noisemakers you need, although I won't keep you here till midnight, I promise. And glad to hear it sounds good. And hello to Deb's Finds. I think I said hi to everybody else. I don't know that we'll have a huge turnout tonight, but welcome to everybody who is watching either on YouTube or Patreon. Level 3 members on both systems get access to this, but you can't always see each other's messages. So if you're watching on Patreon, I will try to hit your messages and make sure you're in the highlights, but I can see everybody's messages. So um, we um, we usually have the level 3 chat in the middle of the month, and I realize New Year's Eve isn't the greatest time for everybody, but I figured some of us are going to be staying put where we think it's safe tonight, and I am definitely one of them. We couldn't do it last week because it was Christmas Eve, and the week before that I was traveling, and the week before that was too soon in the month. So New Year's Eve it is, and I'm actually excited about that because I guess what I'd like to start with is, 2025 was definitely a year of big changes, and tell me what you're glad about it for 2025 and what you're hoping 2026 will bring. Oh, Thrifted Gems, Kristen, it's so nice to see you. I am so glad you're here. Happy New Year to you too, and I was thinking about you because, well. I saw a bunch of stuff that made me think about you. That's all. And gosh, that's it's great to have you here. Oh boy, yeah, you had the crud. A whole bunch of people have had the crud this holiday season, and I'm sorry that you've been stuck at home, but we'll try to make it a little more entertaining for you at least. Um, for me, obviously, 2025 was a year of big changes because I went through a big health crisis and came out the other side, and I'm doing pretty well. And I am getting stronger every day, and I have been staying away from people while I rebuild my immunity, so I do not have the crud, thankfully. And I'm getting ready to do shows in Florida in February. I have to go down there early in January, unfortunately, to move out of one of my mall spaces because the mall, the owner is retiring after all these years. And yeah, I'm excited about the new year. I am definitely Deb's finally getting better. Glad to hear that. Um, yes, for me, 2025, in spite of all of the travails I had, really was a year of great growth in some ways. I think I've got a well, I'm much better organized than I was. Part of it was I left Kentucky and Zeno and his mom got the studio done. They organized my office. They organized my storehouse. They organized pretty much my whole life. And I did the same in Washington while I was there. And hello. Um,
The camera, I think, is making you a little blue.
oh, okay. Zeno is going to make a, small adjustment so that I am less blue, apparently. Carol Sue, great to see you. Yep, a lot of loss this year. I know a lot of folks have too, and
Well,
yes,
maybe not.
it's definitely been a year for changes that way that we maybe would not prefer. Hopefully 2026 will be better in that regard. 2025 is the year you started selling on eBay. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Yes, I know a lot of folks started to well, come back here. You might as well say hi. There's only a few people. They all know you. Well, Happy New Year anyway. Zeno is camera shy tonight. So anyhow, yeah, I think 2026 will have, oh my. Yes.
We'll deal with it later.
Corinne says I glow naturally. You can say whatever comment you're thinking of for later. So anyhow, I gotten a little distracted here, but for me, 2026, I think, is going to be a year where I do bigger things less often. So I'm looking forward to doing 2 shows in Florida. I'm looking forward to doing Teak Stock in May and Springfield, 1 Portland show this year, 1 Spokane show this year, and I think it'll be great. 2025 has been a wake-up call. Yes, I know you went through, you went through terrible health situation too, and I am so glad that you are on the other side of that. I have had to change my diet. We all, the great thing is all the cool stuff we love is getting older, but we are too. And so, we all have to take a little bit of time and a little bit more care with ourselves. Emily, nice to see you. Yes, I hear you got flash frozen. We got it in Kentucky, but minus the precipitation. So it's just cold. It was 70 degrees one day and 29 the next. So that is better, actually. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Gosh, it's like having the plumber here because there's a body laying on the floor next to me. So there we go. You got a hand out. So anyhow, what you have lost 50 pounds. That is fantastic. It is the silver lining. I know for me, I have changed my diet. I am eating much better. I'm sleeping better. I'm definitely healthier. I just had to get cancer to do all that, I guess. And to sort of take stock of things and reprioritize. And, one of those things I figured out also was that I'm looking, like Karen said earlier, her hope for this year is to source better merchandise. I'm looking to sell better things and be more about quality than quantity in my collections and in my selling. So let's see. There we go. Yeah, if you start seeing shadows, you'll be worried. Yes, that's funny. Yes, yeah, that Zeno makes me laugh too. And so now we will go back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Nifty Kitty, it's wonderful to have you. Great to have you here. I'm so glad that there's a nice group of us for New Year's because I do think I have some interesting stuff to talk about. I guess the first thing I will ask you all is, well, so I want to talk about antiques and vintage because every time there's a new year, all of a sudden a whole bunch of stuff is suddenly antique that wasn't before because it turns 100. And that means things made in 1926 have turned 100 years old. And we're going to go over 1926 a little bit and talk about what some of those things are because it's actually a real sea change in terms of what people think of when they think antique, because 1926 was when the world in some ways became much more modern. But we're also going to talk first about what is becoming vintage this year. And I know there's lots of argument about Joanne, so wonderful to see you. Thank you. It's great to have you here. So what we're going to talk about first is what's turning vintage this year. Now, there's lots of arguments about what is vintage. Etsy says 20 years. I say 30. A friend of mine says 50. Another group of people in vintage fashion are trying to tell us that things done during the Obama administration are vintage. And so there's a lot of, it's not like antique. Antique, there is one definition. It's a century old. That's it, unless you're a car, and then 50 is old enough to be antique. Vintage, well, it's up in the air. So I arbitrarily picked, because it's been 35 years officially. Today is the last day of the 35th anniversary of 1990. So tell me in the comments, what were you doing in 1990? And what do you remember being popular that you think might be collectible or interesting to people now? And while you do that, I'll tell you a little bit about what I was doing in 1990. In 1990, I was starting in the antique business. I got my first job in the field as the marketing assistant for a couple who had a chain of antique malls in Washington and Oregon, and they had fluked into developing a factory outlet center in Washington. It was the first one. It was a big success, and suddenly they needed someone to do the advertising, and they hired me because I liked old stuff, and they figured they could train me about antiques and vintage. And boy, they were right, because it completely changed the direction of my life. So 1990 for me was a pretty pivotal year. Um, I've always thought of vintage as 50 years. Yeah, I think a lot of people who've been around a while, 35 seems pretty new, but 35 at this point is old enough now that we are seeing that some of the people who were doing stuff are gone, some of the styles have changed. So um, I am vintage. Yes, I am vintage. Yes, me too. 1990, got married, quit college for him. Big mistake. Yeah, well, we all learned a few things in the 90s. Yeah, I had a few exciting adventures after I did what I did. And yes, I know what you mean, Kristen. Yeah, I just had to, yeah, we just had to completely reset in a bad way. Um, Having and raising a kid, yes. And oh, and you became a floral designer. That's right, AIFD. Very good. You were going through divorce in 1990. Yes, not the happiest memory. As far as stuff you remember, are there any things that leap to mind? And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I have noticed from 1990, because I do think that there are some interesting things to learn about it. I'm going to go ahead and hit the overlays here so that we can show some of this. So we have one person who's in our group who isn't here tonight because he's younger. He's probably celebrating New Year's. He said he was a kid in 1990 and he grew up with dinosaurs. And I remember Welch's Jelly came out with all of these glasses that were dinosaurs. And they were very popular with kids. People kept them, turned them into drinking glasses. You could and still can get them at the thrift stores for 99 cents. But I'll be darned if they're not selling for $5 to $10 on eBay now, because that generation is now 35 to 45 years old and they're starting to collect. You were paying attention to toys because your daughter was 2.5. Yes, yes. What kind of toys did she like, Karen? I would be very curious to hear that, because I know some of the stuff I remember, and some of it I was too old to be a kid and didn't have kids and wasn't paying attention. But I know some things that people really like. The Commodore 64 game system came out that year, and these are worth more now than they cost new then, and they were a big hit and cost real money back then. They are actually selling for hundreds of dollars now. The first generation of Game Boy, I had a kid whose son was born in 1992, and this thing was welded to his hand by the time the year 2000 came around. Super Mario Brothers, Super Nintendo came out, and that was a big deal where I lived in Seattle because that's where they were based. So lots of interest in that. And yes, anything having to do with gowns, princesses, ballerina, and Beauty and the Beast. Yes, my niece was born in 1988. She loved Beauty and the Beast, and Treasure Craft made some Beauty and the Beast items, and we gave her a couple, and she just was so excited. Mrs. Potts actually was one of the characters they did. Oh, you have the gray Game Boy. Yep, that's right. And pretty collectible now, 40, 50 bucks. Yes. Uh-huh. And Legos. Absolutely, Legos were a big thing. Legos started when I was a little kid in the 70s. We really started to see them, but the big kits and the special stuff really started hitting in the 90s and became a big deal. I think Legoland opened up around that time too. Star Wars guns. Absolutely. Here's one I hadn't thought of, but it made lots of sense to me. These are Polly Pockets. They came out of England originally. I think they were made overseas, but it was an English design and they became very popular. This little group here, the three pieces, they remind me a lot of Little Kittles from the 1960s, which are also collectible. Little Kittles, a group like this might sell for $100. This set that you see here with all the pieces, which is important because lots of little pieces to get lost, just sold for $450 online. I could not believe it. It's great that your grandson wants it. That's good. I love it when kids want something that we've got, because I figure that's the next generation. You remember your niece had these. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, a thing I wasn't aware of, and wow, I was surprised. Oh yeah, you couldn't have those in the daycare. I imagine not, probably because the pieces were too small and they would have been spread all over and lost. This movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, anything of the early Ninja Turtles. This came out in 1990. This was super popular. This is a movie poster from the movie, and it is signed. And people who were very little then are now collecting their childhood. And this one with the signature of one of the people involved with the movie sold for $250 recently. And then there was this. Fox. I remember when Fox was a brand new network and they had very few shows and they were mostly comedies, and Fox was on an obscure UHF channel, and finally they bought another station in Seattle so they could get better airwaves because not everybody had cable in 1990 yet. And The Simpsons came out and were their first giant hit. And all of a sudden there were Simpsons games, and the early Simpsons stuff, this sold recently for $175. Another show that was very popular, In Living Color with Jamie Foxx. Now that was a show that was more adult oriented, and so there wasn't a lot of merchandise. These shirts, this is his character Wanda Mosquito Bite, I think was the official name. And she was awful. Who knew Jamie Foxx would go on to be an Academy or award-winning actor? This shirt, which they made a handful of because the show was somewhat popular, but it was still an obscure network. These sell for $250 each now. So if you go to an estate sale and you see a closet full of stuff from this era and you see this, grab it. Yes, The Simpsons were, I remember the start of The Simpsons too, because I loved the Tracy Ullman show. It was the worst rated show in television, and I thought it was great. And The Simpsons were, she would have a few cartoonists do a little 30-second or 1 minute sketch as a bridge between her sketches or leading into the commercial. And one of them was The Simpsons, and Fox said, "Hey, this is great." Oh, yes. The Rugrats and Doug, yes, and Ren and Stimpy came out just a few years later, and I loved Ren and Stimpy. And yes, wow, crazy, can you believe it? Oh no, I'm sorry, I said a few $100s. No, I'm sorry. This T-shirt, let me rephrase that. This T-shirt sold for $1,000 on eBay recently. I am not kidding, and it was not the only one, so I know it wasn't just a fluke. Other things happening in the world at that time, the reunification of Germany. This is a piece of the Berlin Wall, and this one has a certificate of authenticity. I owned one once that was authentic too. I sold it pretty quickly after I got it, and now, of course, I wish I had it. This big one with the certificate is sold for $400 recently. So yes, we're looking at 35 years since the reunification of Germany and the fall of the Berlin Wall. And things from East Germany are selling for pretty good money now. And a lot of them are scarce because the East Germans, as soon as the specter of Soviet domination was gone, destroyed most of the things from the Soviet era because they never liked that situation. This poster says, "Lenin will show you the way" in German, and they were not buying it. Oh, yes, that's right. Turtles, yes. Pokemon was, I think Pokemon came out the next year I think it came out in 1990 in Japan and shortly after in the States. Teletubbies, of course, yes. Let's see here. Whoops. German uniforms from East Germany are big money. And then there was the airlines. The airline industry was going the opposite direction into consolidation, and we were starting to lose a lot of big airlines. And the reason I put the Eastern timetable in here is because Eastern started in 1926, and 1990 was their last year. So we're going to hit both ends of Eastern Airlines with this conversation. Eastern Airlines got in a lot of trouble in the 80s and never really came back from it. TWA went out of business the next year as well. We started really losing a lot of the airlines. Also, 1990 was the year they quit allowing smoking on the airlines. It's hard to believe that people could smoke on the airlines, but looking back on it, it was the thing. Another thing that happened in 1990 was, if you see any of these pieces of art, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston would really like to have them back, because they were robbed at night, and these pieces have never been recovered. The vases from the Shang Dynasty and the other pieces, they're the Rembrandt you see with the couple, with the man standing and the woman sitting with the Elizabethan collars. The value of this heist was $150 million. And unlike the heists in the Louvre recently, well, they got away with it, at least so far. So if you see any of these at an estate sale, they would like to have them back. Let's see, also in art. So Erte died around 1990. There was a big revival of his designs in the 1980s. This is a bronze that was made in 1990. He was very popular again, and these revival bronzes, this one just recently sold for $3,300, so they are still rather valuable. They made all sorts of things. Salvador Dali, prints were very popular. He was at the end of his life. Another artist who was quite controversial in 1990 was Robert Mapplethorpe. This is a poster from his exhibition in Boston, and his exhibition got him in a lot of hot water with the NEA and a lot of people who did not think that his homoerotic art was appropriate for public display or should be being funded by taxpayer dollars. This poster, even though it's wrinkled because it was such a controversy, sold for $160 recently. I had a friend who met Robert Mapplethorpe, and he said he was not a very nice person. Another person who the same friend met and said was a very nice person was Keith Haring, and Keith Haring also died in 1990. This is a swatch watch of his. The colors are absolutely the colors that were popular around 1990. Lots of bright neon colors. Neon was really big, both neon signs that were being made at that time and anything in neon colors. This watch, which is supposed to represent breakdancing, sold for $900 on eBay recently. Yes, some of his work is really good, and some of his exhibits I think were really great. But he definitely got on the wrong side of some people, that's for sure. Oh, your kids wore neon. Yes, absolutely. It was the thing. When I first worked in the antique business in Centralia, and we had the outlet center, one of the outlet stores, all the clothes, all the shelves, everything were neon colors. A few years later, those colors were out of style, and they didn't really know what to do to change over the store because they had really made a commitment to neon. And part of the reason, we just talked about a couple of artists who passed away from AIDS. AIDS devastated the fashion industry as well in the late 1980s. And partly because of that, fashion was kind of directionless in 1990. And because of that and the popularity of a certain group of musicians that I used to hang out with in Seattle, grunge became popular. This is a Ralph Lauren polo grunge era plaid shirt from about 1990. It sold for $250 recently on eBay because polo was still a big brand at that time. Afghans that have neon colors glow with the black light. I'm so glad you told me that, because I have one and I think I'm going to hang on to it because of that. I did not know. Let's see here. The other thing, if you were wearing grunge, is you probably had a pair of Doc Martens. And these are plaid, which was a little unusual. Usually everyone just wore army black. I can't say I got into the Doc Martens phase, but my roommate, he sure did. And we would go up to Vancouver and he would spend lots of money on these. Well, I hope he still has them, because these just sold for $200 online. If you were a woman in that time, you probably wore something that looked a lot like this. This polka dots, very popular. Strong, solid primary colors, very popular. Well, hello there. It's great to have you in the chat. I think you may be on Patreon, so I just want you to know I can see your comments. You may not be able to see everybody else's, but we're glad you're here, and Happy New Year. And power suits, a lot of them still had shoulder pads, as you see in this picture of Hillary Clinton from around the time of her husband's first run for the presidency. On the other hand, there was another style that was considered for elderly people at the time. You see Grandma Yetta from The Nanny on the left, and a Gen Z girl who is doing her best imitation of her on the right. I got this off of Pinterest. I just thought it was fun. Those spangly outfits that Grandma Yetta is wearing on the left there are now very popular and are being worn by younger women and have really made a comeback. Oh, Corey had a pair of metallic blue Doc Martens. That would have been a great color to have. And yes, I have to say I love The Nanny. And yes, shoulder pads, absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I go to do an estate sale and it's somebody who had a wardrobe in the 1980s or 90s, and there's a drawer full of shoulder pads that they ripped out when they went out of style. And the tough part is that without the shoulder pads, the way those outfits are sewn, they don't sit right. So they really do need the shoulder pads. They were made for it. Let's see here. And then, of course, sweaters. We're still coming out of the era of the Cosby sweater and into the era of the ugly Christmas sweater. This particular ugly Christmas sweater, which isn't all that ugly, is an Eddie Bauer from 1990, and it sold for $67 online recently. Okay, let's see here. So now we're going to get into art. And one thing that was popular around 1990 that I don't think people always consider is soft sculpture. We had a person who sold at our Northwest Factory store around this time, and she made giant cactuses out of fabric and all sorts of sculptural pieces, and they sold really well. This is a small one that's more doll sized by a woman who named Gladys Bullitt, who was let me hope I'm saying her name right, I think. Bolt, actually, Boalt. And Gladys Bolt soft sculpture really does sell now. This sold for $80 recently. It's about 12 inches high. It's something you might overlook in a pile of plushes or a pile of dolls if you went to an estate sale, but there is a customer for this now. You ripped them out at the time because they were awkward. Yes, if you had shoulders, they really were too much, actually. If you had sort of small shoulders or were petite. And the whole idea was it was the power suit because women, thankfully, were starting to be taken seriously in business and politics and places that they had not necessarily had entree before. And the suit was supposed to make you look bigger and more prominent. This is another thing from about 1990. I just put one of these out to sell in my antique mall space. I sell them every time I get them. These are tap roots carved into figures. You have to be careful because then they started making resin versions offshore. But if you have the ones that are actual tap roots, this one has a Stephen Herrero tag on it. And this sold for about $40 recently. They're kind of fun. And yes, hard to overlook Shakespeare, yes. And wall art with fibers, definitely wall art with fibers is a thing, yes. And mixed media, fiber and paper and all of that, very popular around 1990. We also see a lot of Southwest style. This is a Mudhead Kachina by Robin Chlad. I wanted to make sure I said that right. This is a Luminaria. This was a Tucson artist. It's signed. It sold for about $45 online recently. And another thing that's very popular now, Bluebirds of Happiness came out in 1990. This one is signed by Ray. And I am looking for the ones that have the old dates. I am no longer buying any of these that I see. I'm only buying the ones from the 1990s because they have started making them again. So I'm really looking at the dates and looking for the original era that were made in the original factory with the original equipment because they have changed to electric equipment now and they are making them again. Robert Eichhold, a lot of us are aware of. Art glass was really popular around 1990 as an art form in a way that it never had been before, especially studio pieces. So Eichhold, very collectible, still selling well. Mount St. Helens glass, this is an egg, and the egg-shaped paperweights were very popular around 1990. This recently sold for about $30. Gordon Smith paperweight, the Blackberry. This one is sold for $350 recently. All of these art glass paperweights that were contemporary around 1990 are very popular again with collectors now. and are selling for good prices, in some cases more than they sold for new. Now, this I think is very typical of 1990 era art. Whether it's glass art, which this is fused glass. Fused glass also very popular, an old Egyptian technique where they melt layers of glass together and fuse it together into a design that had a revival around then. This is Martha Wolfe. She was known for these fused glass cats. This one recently sold for $300. They were not inexpensive new either. They probably sold for close to that in 1990. But if you see the blockiness, the geometry, all the wild colors, and there's a real cartoonish aspect. 1990, right about then, it's interesting, someone mentioned the Tracy Ullman show. They had very wild, sort of cartoony graphics for that show that were vibrating around on the screen in neon colors, and that was definitely reflected in art of all sorts at that time. And oh, thank you for looking for St. Helens stuff for me. That's great. On the other hand, color blocking, also very popular around 1990. This is Dante Maroney. This is Pilchuck School. This recently sold for $650. Charles Lawton, very popular from that time. His son David, I believe, is still producing. Charles is no longer with us. This is one of his multi-flora lines. This sold for $750 recently. That's about what they sold for new. They've always been a premium piece. And yes, and hello, Carmen. It's great to have you with us. And yes, very Memphis style on the, let me go back to that because I don't want to confuse anyone here. This is not Memphis style, what we're seeing on the screen here. But this piece, sorry about this. Every time I go through the, put a someone's comment up, it takes me away from my overlays. Here we go. Yeah. This piece, very Memphis style, absolutely, with strong geometry and very different blocks. Each piece of the geometric piece is a different color. That is absolutely Memphis style. The Memphis studio in Italy started this look around 1981. It went out of production in 1987, but by then it had really permeated the culture and art and continued to be very popular into the 90s. Yes, Mary Engelbrecht, definitely a 1990s thing. Lots of wild and colorful items in a different way, more cute. We'll see something that's sort of like that in a minute here when I show you ceramics from that year. Let me see here. And again, all of these things, at least how most people define vintage, are now considered vintage. This is Blanco, and I'm glad that we have our friend who loves the Blanco here with us. This is their 1990 catalog, and look at their colors. It's interesting to you have that washed out bottle green sea glass look. That was very popular. Pilgrim Glass did that color that year too. You have plum, and you have a sort of blue, but almost like a teal blue. Definitely 1990s colors. Over at Pilgrim, they were making a lot of cameo glass. Kelsey Murphy's cameo glass was really taking off around 1990, where it was carved layer over layer, just like Gallet did back around 100 years before this. And this is a nice black piece with the nice flower on it there. Fenton was going a different direction with painted glass, and a lot of the stuff that people are loving from Fenton now was made around 1990. This is a Burmese picture with the decoration, and it has a 1990 date on it. They also got on the unicorn craze. Unicorns became a thing in the late 80s, and it's hard to find unicorns that were really good quality. The Fenton unicorn is one of the few I've seen. A lot of them were sort of schlocky. I just bought a couple because there are collectors for it, and it's definitely of the era. I bought 2 ceramic ones yesterday at a shop, and they're black ceramic made in Taiwan because that's who was making this stuff at that time. But this one is Fenton and a little more desirable. This is very typical of the era too. Again, kind of Memphis style, also really fun, lots of different design, lots of color, not matching. People got away from the idea that everything had to match at this point in a way that had never been done before. People just were more playful and informal about things in design. And these are by Auraforce. They sold for $100 each recently. also sort of whimsical, based on old designs from the South, but a new generation started making the stoneware face mugs around this time, or bottles. This one was done by Cooper and sold for $300 recently. This one is Raku. Raku, very popular around 1990 and very popular with collectors of vintage now. This one is Rick Ellsworth. He did a lot of fish, and again, look at the whimsy in that. This sells for about $50. I think it could go for more eventually. Phil Morgan, on the other hand, this is crystalline, and if you did pastels at that time, they were more these color of pastels because the color scheme's starting to change from jewel tones into more 60s revival colors around 1990. Yes, I think Raku is really neat too, actually. I didn't appreciate it as much at the time. I remember around the time it came out, and a lot of it was made in the Northwest, and I wasn't that impressed. Now I'm seeing other designs that were made elsewhere, and some of them are really great and have a little more color to them. Here we go. This is the thing that reminds me a little bit of Mary Engelbrecht in terms of her design. This is Mary Rose Young. This is a conserves pot. She was another studio artist doing ceramics around 1990, and this one's dated 1990 and sold for $125 recently. Then you had the commercial companies. Treasure Craft was making for Disney in 1990. The Pinocchio fishbowl cookie jar is one of my favorites of theirs. They also made Southwest style was still really big. It came on in the late 80s and was still prevalent around 1990. This is their Saguaro line with the cactus chip and dip and the little relish tray. The chip and dip, by the way, just so you know, if you see one of these, is supposed to have a pink flower dip bowl sitting in that arm on the left with the big well there. So this is actually incomplete. They also were merged with Falsgraf by that time, and Falsgraf made a line called Midnight Sun. So Treasure Craft made the chip and dip bowl, and these other pieces were Falsgraf, and it's a really hard thing to do because it's similar to Barro Negro Mexican ceramics, where you have the matte and the gloss black, and it's a difficult process to do. So that was a big and a very collectible pattern now. They also did it in a blue color. So that's 1990, but what about 1926? Because that's what's 100 years old now. And 1996 is, or I mean, 1926 is now antique. And 1926 was I can actually show my face for a minute. 1926 was a really pivotal year for a whole lot of reasons. Refrigeration became available to most people. Refrigerators were newly available in 1926. A lot of people suddenly had cars who had never had a car before. A lot of people had, about 2/3 of the people in the country had electricity, and that meant all sorts of electric appliances were being built. And so travel changed, the way people lived changed, the way groceries were promoted and sold changed. So let's take a look at some things from 1926, because of course we know things from that era are collectible already, but what's changed is now that they're going from vintage to antique, this is perhaps the first era where things that were industrial production items are now going to be considered antiques. In the past, we had arts and crafts and we had Victorian, and yeah, there was manufacturing, but a lot of stuff still had hand embellishment or hand carving or handwork. The mission period in the 19 teens really was against the whole idea of manufactured things, and so people were making things by hand. By the 20s, manufacturing was in charge, and it really changed stuff. Oh yes, when the Waltons got an electric refrigerator, yes, and for them that was in the 30s, because in a rural place like they lived in fiction land, they wouldn't have had electricity. I'm here in Western Kentucky, and the house that I'm sitting in, which was built in 1910, probably didn't have electricity until the late 30s, when the dams were built for the TVA near here, and they electrified this area. Let me see here. Funnily enough, my storehouse built in 1898 in Earlington, that was a coal mining town, and they had electricity right away because they fired it with coal. Sorry, let me find my place here. Okay, so 1926. Well, first of all, just like this year, It was a big celebration of the Declaration of Independence. And in Philadelphia, they had a World's Fair called the Sesquicentennial International Exposition. This year, we are having the semi-quincentennial, which means half of 500 years, so 250 years. So I imagine that things from the bicentennial, the sesquicentennial, are going to become more collectible, and the prices seem to be holding up with that. This poster recently sold for $300 online. This is a World's Fair catalog for the exhibits there. It was not a very successful World's Fair. It didn't really get finished in time. There was bad weather. It closed early. It didn't really go as well as they thought, and that's why in 1976 they didn't have a World's Fair type event like they had in Philadelphia for the previous two. Here's 1976. I just love this cover. Flip Wilson as Ben Franklin, Sonny Bono being hung for being a patriot, and Susan Ford, the daughter of the president, Gerald Ford at the time, as Martha Washington. I just thought that was really fun. It's actually, People magazine started really becoming popular around this time, and most of their stuff is not that valuable, but this particular one's hard to find and sold for $40 recently. If you were a kid or had a kid, you might have gotten them a Disney bicentennial sweater. And of course, that's not from, oh, I kind of got those in the wrong order. Well, that's not from 1926. 1926 was significant for electric appliances. This is the Toastmaster. 1926 was the first year with a pop-up toaster with a timer instead of the old kind where you had to put it in, fold the flap down, guess whether it was burning or not. When you smelled it burning, hopefully you hadn't ruined it, then you took it out and flipped it over. This could toast both sides at once, and when it was done, it popped up. That was a big new thing. These sell for about $50 in good condition now. Steam iron, brand new thing in 1926. This is an L-deck. There was also the Liberty steam iron. It looks kind of primitive, but you put water in that tube and you hooked up the cord to that little plug on the back, and you had an iron with steam instead of having to sprinkle with sprinkle bottles. And that was a big time-saving device, especially if you did a lot of laundry. And they sold for $10 in 1926, which was a lot of money. They sell for about 30 or 40 now. Refrigeration, of course, big new thing. This is from 1928 because monitor top refrigerators were being developed in 1926 but didn't come out until the next year. And this is the advertising clock, which these sell for about $300 now. They also did salt and pepper shakers. You'll see the refrigerators in good shape sell for between $500 and a few $1,000 depending on size and color. And a big chain of grocery stores opened called the Independent Grocers Alliance. It was actually originally called the National Independent Grocers Alliance, and then they dropped the N. This is a shield from one of their stores from shortly after they started in 1926. And because of refrigeration, some of the stuff you could get in them included Bird's Eye fruit and vegetables, which came out a few years before and was a huge time saver and really changed the way people lived. People suddenly could be on the go, come home and defrost something and make a meal in half the time it took them before. And if you lived somewhere where it was hard to get fresh food or fruit or vegetables, well, you could have fruit and vegetables all year. So it really changed nutrition and really actually helped increase the life expectancy of people. Or you could have canned ham. This is Hormel. They came out with that in 1926, and the delightful product Spam followed quite shortly thereafter. Let's see. Schick razors, if you see this set, they came out in 1926 also, and this set in the box is worth about $50. And Purina Dog Chow came out in 1926. And stuff related to that. There's also ceramic bowls that were made that say Purina Chows. I've had them a few times for Purina Mink Chow, I guess if you were raising minks. I haven't had a dog chow one, but they're worth some money too. This sign's worth about $300. Old Gold cigarettes were new that year. This sign's recently sold for $5.25. Raisin Bran, brand new in 1926. It was actually made by a company called Skinner's that makes Uncle Sam cereal. And Uncle Sam cereal is not actually my favorite. But they had the market of Raisin Bran to themselves for about 15 years. Took a long time for the other companies to catch up. This I think is really cool. This is a Paul Henningsen lamp. This is one of the first Art Deco designer pieces, and the Art Deco exposition had just been the year before, and these lamps are really great if you can find them. This one sold recently for $7,000, and the pendant lamp versions sell for about $2,000. See, everybody has a different palate. I might like Uncle Sam's cereal now as an adult. As a kid, I didn't think it was interesting, probably because I was eating too much sugar as a kid. Camay soap, the soap of beautiful women. You can imagine what it would be like if somebody came out with that kind of an ad campaign now. That sells for about $10. That came out in 1926 as well. And then there was prohibition, and a lot of companies were struggling with what to do with our old beer factory. So Schlitz Beer decided to, in honor of prohibition, call their chocolates Purity Village chocolates and sell them to exactly the opposite customer of the customer they had before. Um, it is it is really interesting to me to see too, and that's why I decided to do this. I know it's kind of a laundry list, but so many innovations in this year particularly, that I thought it really was interesting. And it also is interesting because I think it gives us some ideas of what now is antique that we haven't thought of as antique before. We've thought of as vintage. Anheuser-Busch had to make cabinets and refrigerator bodies in their factory in St. Louis because they couldn't make beer. Now, let's see here. I have a late coffee grinder that was using it, needs a new toggle switch. That's the thing. The stuff was really well made. I I had a huge collection of 1920s percolators once, and I was amazed. We sold, I think I had 50 of them. We sold 35 of them to an espresso place that was opening that wanted to put them up on a shelf around the ceiling as decoration. And he came back the next day and said, I was amazed. Just for fun, I plugged a bunch of them in because they had the cords with them and they all work still. And yeah, it was really well made. Um, it was only the designs that changed, but the function, no, they were great. Let's see here. Okay. In the world of books, and I'll mention books briefly because we do see them at estate sales, and let me get down to here. There we go. The Pulitzer Prize was won by Sinclair Lewis. He had written Babbitt shortly before, which was very popular, and he wrote the book Martin Aerosmith, also just called Aerosmith. And this sells for $45 or $50 signed. He did sign a lot of them. He actually refused to collect his Pulitzer Prize because he said, my other book was better, and you're just giving me this because I'm popular because my other book was so famous, and now this book's selling, but I don't think it's as good as the other book. So he definitely was not too impressed by awards. Edna Ferber wrote Showboat that year, and then Jerome Kearns came to her and said, I really want to make this into a musical. And she thought, oh, they're going to make it into some light, trite Broadway musical. And she really wanted to, she was making some points with this book. And then he said, no, I want to write it with Rodgers and Hammerstein, and we want to make this a serious thing. So she gave them the rights to produce the musical. I saw the musical about 5 or 10 years ago, and I'm not a big musical guy, and I really thought it was great. When did planned obsolescence become a thing? Well, there was right about this time, actually, because Ford is building I'm going to cut to something I was going to show you in a minute here while I talk about this because it's relevant. Let's see, it's not too far down here. Just a moment, and I'll answer your question because I think it's a very good question. Um, Here we go. Okay. This is the Ford Model T of 1927 or 26. It looks a little different than the ones before. It's a little more substantial. It has headlights included in the car instead of attachments. It's a little bit longer. It's a little bit more powerful. Henry Ford did not want to update his car. His theory was, I am going to, he had done some pretty amazing things. In 1926, as a matter of fact, he came up with the idea that I only want my employees to work 5 days a week, 40-hour weeks. That's it, because otherwise they won't have any leisure time and they won't need a car. And I want them to buy a car. And he also, interestingly enough, fought for minimum wage laws. And because he paid over minimum wage, and he said, we need to pay people a decent wage if we want to make all these industrial products and expect them to buy them. So, planned obsolescence, well, Chevrolet was becoming very popular because Chevrolets started changing the colors of the car, updating the features of the car every year, and their general manager, Alfred Sloan, had the idea that every year you make things a little different, and that way the one from the year before isn't as good, and you can get people to get rid of the old one and buy a new one. And that was the beginning of planned obsolescence. It really came from the car industry and specifically from General Motors. And it worked because within a few years, Chevys were outselling Fords. At the time that this was made in 1926, Ford Model Ts were over 60% of the cars on the road. So planned obsolescence, definitely, it was calculated and it changed things a lot. It also gave us a lot of really cool stuff to look at, but it definitely, if we just kept making the same thing, they'd get cheaper and cheaper. And that was the idea that Ford had, was it would be accessible to more people. Another book that came out in 1926, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And interestingly enough, the other thing that came out in 1926 was Marilyn Monroe was born and ended up starring in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes when it became a movie in the 1950s. Frida Kahlo was also born that year. This is her picture in a velvet dress. This was her first self-portrait. And interestingly enough, in 1990, which we were talking about, there was a huge revival of interest in Frida Kahlo. So again, antique to vintage. Rudolph Valentino, very popular. The Son of the Sheik was a follow-up to his most successful movie, The Sheik, which was made 5 years before. He made this movie, it released at the end of July, and by the middle of August, he died of a ruptured ulcer, and it was a huge psychic shock to people. And 100,000 people came out to see his funeral in New York, and there's the pictures there. In a way, as unfortunate as his death was, he might have been lucky in that for his career, the first talkies came out in 1926. This is John Barrymore with Hedda Hopper. I always thought she was just a gossip columnist. I did not realize she was an actress herself originally. And this is Don Juan, the first talkie movie that came out. Building in Failure, yes. Yeah, well, that has become worse and worse. And I think that has to do with the way things are made, and there is some deliberateness to that. It also has to do, though, to be truthful, it's not entirely just to build in failure. It's also because some of the materials that we use that made things really great and strong actually were not really great materials to be using, like Freon in refrigerators. Whenever I get an old refrigerator, I think, oh boy, if this thing doesn't work, what do we do? Because we have this chemical in it that we can't get rid of. So there's both things. We want things to be lighter because we're shipping them from far away. If they were heavier, they might be more substantial and last longer, but then it costs a lot of money to get them to us. Burns and Allen were married in 1926, and that was an interesting year to be married because they were just about to leave the vaudeville circuit and be discovered and put on radio. And radio was a huge thing in 1926, and radios originally looked like this. Radios came out a little bit before this, but 1926 was when we got to the point where there were 500 radio stations, and more than half the people in the country had radio by 1926. And your radio would look like that as the amplifier and receiver, and then the speaker would look like this. This is a particularly beautiful one. This one's made of purulin, which is a celluloid, and this speaker alone sold for $1,100 recently. The radio receivers sell for a couple hundred, but the pretty speakers, like this one with the needlepoint of the basket, were separate in the 1920s. They didn't unify them into one machine until about 1930. Another thing that was really popular that had not existed, or at least not been considered a thing, was scatter rugs or throw rugs. That was a new concept in 1926. And this one happens to be a Masonic one. One of our members collects Masonic related items. And this is a welcome mat that is a Masonic emblem that sold for $65 recently. Hooked rugs and making hooked rugs, especially in rural areas, but even in urban areas as a pastime, became a thing. Little ones like this might go on a dresser or as a bath mat, and then bigger ones around the house. It was really a departure from the millennia old notion of doing big area rugs everywhere. Another thing, of course, is telephones. Candlestick phones were not new in 1926, but payphones were a pretty new idea. And here's one with the coin box, which is an honor system originally. You had to put in a nickel. Another thing, and I know Carol Sue Pope lives near this factory, which unfortunately is just now liquidating their stock. This is Howard Miller Clocks in Zeeland, Michigan. They actually took over the clock business from Herman Miller Furniture and started in 1926. And originally they imported parts from Germany, and they look like German wall clocks and grandfather clocks. And they kept making those traditional styles pretty much through their production. But this one is an Art Deco one made in their early years and designed by the very famous designer Gilbert Rohde. And this clock sells for about $500 to $700. Zippers, also a pretty new concept. The zipper really only comes about in the 1920s, originally for boots. By 1926, it's becoming something used in dresses. And so you have flappers who, instead of having to have a lace-up corset and a bodice and a separate piece with the big flowing skirt, suddenly they have very sheer dresses that they can climb into and then just zip up the back in one swoop instead of having to button and hook everything. And it really changes fashion quite a bit. This dress is a beauty, and this sold for $2,400 recently. Emerald cut is a new concept. It's not that people didn't have emeralds before, but the concept of making emerald cut in everything, including costume jewelry, was brand new in 1926. And this is check glass, and this is a very nice pendant with an emerald cut. This is worth somewhere in the $125 range now. And of course, flappers would take wonderful things, because another new term in 1926 was cosmetology. And cosmetology, of course, you need things like compacts, and you need little lipsticks, and you need things like this you can carry with you. And yeah, this is the reason I wanted to show all this stuff, is because I thought, these are things that some of us have thought have been antique all along, and for other people are surprised, like, oh, we're calling those antiques now. It's really an interesting inflection point, I think. So we're at a dawning of a new time. Oh, you have a white flapper dress from the 20s. That is cool. I would love to see that. Send a picture sometime if you ever think of it. Ooh, fully beaded. Wow. Those are amazing. I just love them. They're so beautiful. Sorry, let me find my way again here. Okay. Let's see where we were. All right. Oh, yes, and of course you have the flapper purses. Whiting and Davis had been around longer than the 1920s, but by the 20s you're starting to see these styles. And this one, which sold for several $100s recently, is a really good example, and an unusual one because of the scenic with the people out in the boat in the trees. And part of the reason is that you start seeing wistful scenes like this because people are starting to travel in a way that they never did. Where I am here, Right now I'm in Dawson Springs, Kentucky, and this was a water spa 100 years ago, but that era ended really quickly because it used to be you came here by train, you spent a week, you drank the healthful waters and you recuperated and you went on a boat on the stream here and it was all very lovely. Well, all of a sudden you might have a car, or if you really have money, you might, if I can get to it here. Here we go. Somewhere here. There we go. If you really had money, you might fly on a brand new airplane. A lot of the airlines started in 1926. United Airlines starts that year. Uh, that's a lamp from their early days. Eastern Airlines, this is their old logo, a sterling hat badge that's worth about $175 now. Eastern started in 1926. They started giving airmail routes. The government started giving them away. It ended up being quite involved with a big scandal and had to all be undone in the early 30s and redone. But the airlines are starting to be a thing. If you really have money, you would take the airline. Oh, your town was a spa town as well, Eaton Rapids. Well, I guess that makes sense because you've got the river there. And like I said, the Model T, a lot of people are able to drive. And because of that, in 1926, we have the first nationwide highway system. The U.S. highway system is started in 1926. And that meant that it was federal funding for highway improvements. And one of the first ones they paved end to end was Route 66. This sign recently sold for $450. It's an early sign from the route, and of course that became the popular way to get to the West Coast from Chicago. So if you wanted to travel west, you went through Route 66, and part of where you went was through the Native American reservations, and that's when turquoise jewelry started to really spread in popularity because all of a sudden people traveling through were being exposed to Navajo-made Native American jewelry. And that was a new idea and very exotic to people. This is a great pin, by the way, the butterfly, and a rather old one as well. Or if you were on the East Coast, you could get to Florida and St. Petersburg, where I have antique mall space and I stay in this area in the winter. My family moved down there during this period of time in the 1920s. And this was the Vinoy Park Hotel, and it was the fanciest hotel in town, built in 1926. And thankfully, it was saved and is still a hotel today. And St. Pete was a huge destination, and then the land boom died at the end of 1926 because a big hurricane hit Miami, and all of a sudden the Florida land boom was over. And that actually helped lead us into the Depression a few years later because a lot of people lost their shirts. This was the old pier in St. Petersburg. Oh, that's so interesting. The dealer gave a driver's license with the purchase. Yeah, a lot of places you didn't have to have a license. My dad and his friends took an old Ford Model T in 1946 from a junkyard, spent $10 or $20 on it, fixed it up, taught themselves how to drive, and that's how they learned how to drive, and none of them had a license. And when you were in Florida, you might hang out at Spa Beach in St. Petersburg, which my ancestors actually were running at the time. And if you were really posh, well, in your bathing costume, you might have your floats, and you might play mahjong on a floating board. I thought this was the greatest picture. Mahjong sets pretty much looked like this at the time. These were imported directly from China. The game was a huge, huge popular thing. There were parlors in St. Pete and other tourist destinations where you would sit and play Mahjong and drink tea all day. It was basically the alternative to a bar because it was prohibition and the bars were closed. And so Mahjong became very popular, and these old Mahjong sets are very popular from the 1920s and sell for roughly $2 to $250 a piece in good condition. If they have ivory or bakelite chips, it helps. So so that's sort of a recap of what is now antique. It's been 100 years, and 100 years ago was a really pivotal time. So what we're going to start calling antiques in the next 10 years in this business is really going to change, and the nature of it is going to change. Art Deco is suddenly starting to become antique, and that's a big thing. Now, a question I get a lot, and I'm curious your thoughts. What do you think about the notion that 100 years means that something is going to become more popular as a collectible? Do you subscribe to that theory or not? And the reason I bring it up is that another antique appraiser on YouTube, Dr. Lori, always says that, oh, when something hits 100 years, that means that, boom, it's going to take off because that's a big marker and that's a big thing. Do you perceive it that way? I'm curious your opinions about that, and then I'll tell you mine. Um, because I'm just always I wonder sometimes where these things come from, and is it that there's a basis in fact, or is it just an opinion? Corinne says no. Okay. What do the rest of you think? And I'll tell you what I think and why, and give a couple of examples. I love when something is 100 years old. Now, I have to admit, I do too. I love being able to say something is an antique, and that part of it to me really resonates. I do think that makes it really cool. Like, wow, this is from the last century. Um, so that part of it, I really do get. Any other opinions out there? I'm just curious. I'll give just a second while I get ready for this. I'm not sure. It would depend on the popularity of the piece prior. Ah, okay. Okay, I'm going to riff on this, Carol, because that is my conclusion too. And I can give some examples. Art Deco is turning 100 years old. Art Deco is starting to be really hot again. It was really hot in the 1980s when a lot of the design was Deco revival, and the collections were huge and the prices were enormous. Um, I don't know that they necessarily become more collectible. I don't quite agree. Yeah, I have to say that's where I fall on it too. I agree with Don that I think it's really cool, but I don't think that you can just say 100 years is a magic number that makes things more valuable, because arts and crafts from the 1910s was super popular in the 1990s. The prices went through the ceiling. And what happened, just like it did with Art Deco in the 80s, the prices got so high, like is happening with designer mid-century furniture right now, that new people couldn't afford to start collecting it. And what happens is you end up with a situation where new people are priced out and the old people have everything they can fit. So then the prices fall back a little bit. I don't know that most people realize the turnover, and you have to be skilled to know an item is a certain year. And that's the other thing too, exactly. I don't think collectors, I think collectors are delighted to be able to say my item's a true antique, but I don't think they necessarily think that way in terms of I'm going to buy it because it's a true antique. So that's my sense about that. And I just, on the other hand, I think some things that maybe people have just not thought of from the 20s will suddenly be more desirable because people are like, oh, wow, it's that old. And that might turn the light on. I love Art Nouveau. If I could find Art Nouveau, I would buy it. I would have collected it if I could. It's so hard to find good pieces. Um, Yes, Dr. Lori also said pewter would be hot again with the coming national birthday. That might be true where Dr. Lori sells. One thing I have to say before I get on her case too much is Dr. Lori is from near Philadelphia. She deals with a lot of very wealthy people who live on the main line of Philadelphia. Well, Philadelphia is the epicenter. It's where the Declaration of Independence was signed. So these things matter to people there, and there is an interest there on a level that is way beyond a lot of other parts of the country. So when she says things like that, I don't think she's wrong. I just think she sees her part of the market. I still can't sell pewter. I have a lot of people who pewter, I remember pewter plates from England used to sell for $200, and I can get $50 for them today. Will that change? Maybe. We'll see. But I do think some things will become more collectible. And actually, that's a perfect segue for the last little bit I wanted to talk to you about. That is, let me get to it here, back to overlays. What are some of the things that we can count on for this year? It's always hard to predict, and we'll talk. I like pewter too, honestly. I grew up with pieces because I had an aunt in Connecticut, again, where it's very popular, and she would send us the 70s revival pewter stuff, and I thought it was really neat and substantial and well made, and it kept the drinks cold, and they quit making it with lead a long time ago, so that's good. Um, Lori, it's so great to have you here. I'm glad you're with us, and yeah, we'll have to we'll have another member chat next month, probably closer to the regular time. I think sometime around the 20th, and I'll make sure you all know in advance. Let me get to my overlay here. So there are some things happening this year that I think will actually bring certain things into collecting view. So let's talk about events coming up in 2026. Of course, the first big one, obviously, the elephant in the room, is the semi-quincentennial, say it 5 times fast, is this year, 250th anniversary. There are a lot of things planned for Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Charleston, South Carolina, I believe, is having some celebrations. I know that there will be across the country. And there is some interest in this, like there was in the bicentennial. Coins are obviously one area, and Corinne just mentioned silver. The price of silver is so high right now that a lot of people who might have bought this coin because, oh, it's a commemorative and I'll buy it and put it away and it's $30. Well, now it's 130. They may end up not making as many of these as they counted on, so they may end up being a little scarcer. On the other hand, everybody and their brother is lining up to get one of the last sets of pennies. They're only doing them as a commemorative. It's going to be the 2026 penny. They're not doing them for us to use anymore. And the penny is going away. And so that is something that a lot of people will buy and collect. And will the prices go up eventually? I wouldn't count on it, because in the bicentennial, everybody got the bicentennial coin sets. And I can tell you, you just about could spend them like change. Okay. On the other hand, there's this very strange badge, and I've noticed when I look at bicentennial pieces that things like this that are sort of offbeat and don't really seem like they fit end up being collectible later. One of my favorite ones, and hopefully I can find that because I had it in the wrong order here, but give me a second. One of my favorite was, if I can grab it. I know you're in here somewhere. Here we go. Okay. Yes. This piece here, the bicentennial edition, 1976, of the Stingray bicycle. The Stingray bicycle is very collectible because I know as a kid it was the cool thing. You had your hands way up here and the banana seat. They were actually really not very pleasant to ride as a kid, but they were cool, and they're still cool. And the bicentennial edition, this in this condition, sold for $2,500 recently. So strange things that you wouldn't think of being patriotic that were done for the bicentennial are worth money now, and I think that'll happen again. We also have presidential midterm election, or not presidential, midterm elections coming, and one thing that I think will be collectible is this, because she's not running now. And so I don't think they're going to probably distribute a whole lot of these pins. So I think that that actually might end up being an interesting footnote to history. And I have a feeling other political collectibles from earlier times will be as well. The World Cup is coming in 2026, and it will be the second time the U.S. has hosted it, this time along with Canada and Mexico. This is one of the Hamilton jackets. These Hamilton jackets for all sports are very popular. If you see a Jeff Hamilton jacket and it's not priced over $50, pick it up. This one just sold for $3,500, and they are out there. The 94 men's jersey for the soccer team sells for $400 plus now. I went to that event. I didn't buy one. I thought they were expensive. They were $40. Another thing happening, Artemis 2 is going to be the first launch of a rocket going around the moon with people in it since the Apollo missions. And meanwhile, Voyager 1, which launched in 1977, is going to pass the 1 light-year away from the Earth this year around November. So both of those things happening about the same time. I suspect that will create new interest in space-related collectibles. This map of the Voyager recently sold for over 100. And we also have the Winter Olympics. And Winter Olympics stuff is collectible. And I think back to earlier Olympics and Calgary 1988. Well, that's old enough to be vintage now. And so we have the Toque, even the Calgary Barbie doll. Most of these newer Barbies don't sell for much, but the Barbie skater, she sold for $35 recently. And for a newer Barbie, that's pretty good because Olympic collecting is definitely a theme. They also started doing a lot of pins. These sets are pretty common, but you will see people looking for that kind of thing again. Inaugural pin for Jimmy Carter, yeah, and they definitely are starting to sell. Exactly, now that he's gone, time marches on. I think real quickly I'll wrap up with a few things because I said I would talk a little bit about what other trends and things are being predicted. I wanted to show you some things that related to events that are coming that I thought were obvious, but let's go to this. Bear with me here. I have these in a wonderful order that made sense. And here we go. Yes. Okay. So the first thing, I always mention the Pantone color of the year. And I especially have to mention it this year because it is an off-white with a gray tone. And the critics said, boo. The interior designers don't like it. The decorating magazines don't like it. It's neutral white. And everyone is starting to say, Pantone's lost its magic. Well, to me, what Pantone is doing is they're following a trend rather than leading it. And white has been really, really popular in decorating. Everybody's been painting their walls white for 5 or 6 or 7 years. And what I'm seeing is that people, thank you, Don. That's what everyone else said too. It's such a bland color. If you notice, unlike usual, usually they just show the color. This time they actually had to have a person looking at clouds with the color around them and underneath them, because if they just showed you white, people would have thought they made a mistake and didn't print the color on the swatch. That's how boring it is. And yes, they said it was to symbolize peace and serenity, and that's a lovely notion. There's lots of other colors that do that too. Soft blues do that. Pastels do that, and those are the colors that the designers and decorators are saying are actually the color of the year. And when you look at the other, like Sherwin-Williams and the other paint companies, they are not showing white as the color of the year. So it's not a color, it's light. That is exactly what one of the decorators who was interviewed about it said as they sniffed at it and said, that is ridiculous. Why would they call that a color? It's not a color, and you are absolutely right. So what we're seeing instead is the designers are predicting that people might like the white as furniture against a strong color, or strong colors against the white walls that everybody already has. And yes, the absence of color, exactly. So what we're seeing is that millennials are starting to like, and they are a lot of the people buying houses and furniture now, because as older folks, we either have them or we're downsizing out of them, and younger folks can't afford them. So millennials are kind of the target market for a lot of this decorating stuff now, and they're looking at dark furniture and patterned upholstery. We're definitely seeing a lot of that. Yes, another one chose mushroom beige, and I thought that was as boring as could be too. Yes, absence of light is, yes, all light is, that's right. The absence of color is black and all color spectrum is white. Yeah, that's correct. Carved wood starting to be of interest, which I think is fascinating. All this brown English furniture that everyone has been saying for years won't sell. I know Willie Joe, they're busy tonight, but they're usually in our chat. They said, we're starting to sell brown furniture. And I noticed I've sold 3 pieces of brown furniture in the last 4 months in my mall in Centralia, Washington, and it is starting to sell. For one thing, the prices on brown antique furniture are rock bottom right now. It's way cheaper than buying new furniture. And because of that, a lot of the decorators are using antiques, that and the supply chain problems we had a few years ago. They are finally, the designers begrudgingly are using antiques and vintage with new stuff in their sets because younger people like the sustainability, can afford it. It's a different look for them. Yes, brown is absolutely selling. Um, what else are we seeing here? Let's see. Then there's the grand millennial, which is this idea of sort of grandma meets millennial sensibilities. A lot of millennials spent a lot of time with their grandparents. And that was because mom and dad were working, or maybe there was a single parent and grandparents helped raise the kids. So they were used to grandma's wicker and plates on the wall and little pictures and wallpaper and all these things that older people decorated like back in the 1980s and 90s. And 1990, by the way, I forgot to mention this, was the peak year of births in the millennial generation. So there are a whole lot of people born in 1990 who are now starting to look at antiques and vintage. Um, and another thing that is popular with them, gilded frames. And of course, we've seen a lot of gold, including in the White House. But I think that what people are really looking at is not really that shiny gold. They're looking at more of a soft gold. That's what I'm seeing. So I think of those Anthony figures, the gold painted pottery from the 60s. It's more that kind of gold rather than shiny, bright, brassy gold. They're liking brass that's got a little patina and a little age, which is great for vintage people because that's what we see. Another this is Vogue magazine, Vogue Decor. I was so surprised. An antique Welsh dresser with antique stoneware and ironstone and transferware, which I know Carol Sue is a big fan of transferware. And I am too. And what a great piece and what a great display. And the idea that people are going back to decorating like this honestly really bodes well for the antique and vintage market, I think. Um, Uranium glass, yes, but also depression glass in general. They're starting to show multiple colors on tables. It's light, it's airy, it's fun, it's bright, it looks good against white. You've all got a bunch of white kitchens. Let's put some color in it. And depression glass is another thing that really has been kind of flat or down in price for years. And now all of a sudden it's like, hey, depression glass is cool again. Um, Yes, perfect New Hampshire stuff. A lot of things are regional, of course, but absolutely that is a look I would see there. I saw it a lot in more rural parts of Washington. On the other hand, in more urban places, like our friend Kristen, is Blanco glass. And we're finally starting to see the designer saying, yeah, a big wall of colorful glass. That's a great idea. Well, of course it is, because us vintage people have been doing this for the last 10 years or 30 years in my case. And now all of a sudden it's hip and cool. Well, yeah, it is. So that was nice to see. Um, Swag lamps and pendant lamps, very popular again. And it's so funny because I remember as a kid thinking these were kind of a little tacky and too much, and now I just love them, and I would have a collection just like that on my ceiling right now if I could find them. I used to get them for nothing. Now they're 3 digits every time. Oh yes, the green glass in front of the window, exactly. Oops, I think I have run out. Um, so that's the end of the year. That's the end of vintage for 19 early 20 stuff. It's all antique now. Vintage is starting to mean something different than it meant before. And so we actually have some exciting things to look forward to, whether you're a collector or a reseller. The other thing that I thought was so interesting is over and over the decorating magazines are talking about how, oh, vintage is cool. Oh, you should get some stuff at a swap meet. Oh, go to an antique mall. It's so refreshing to me to see, and it makes sense again because prices are higher, inflation drove people into the antique business in the 70s because it's like I can get better quality. You talked to Karen about planned obsolescence and things not being made to last. Well, people are catching on. I could buy something flimsy made of particle board. If I'm lucky, it might not be full of cancerous materials, or I could go get a solid piece of wood that has been around for 100 years and will be around long after I'm no longer around. And that is such a great thing to see that now the mainstream are starting to catch on to what us collectors have loved all along. And I think that's very exciting. And I think that it is very exciting to be part of this. And I'm just so grateful that all of you are. And yes, we have noticed this too. A lot of our shoppers, it was very fashionable with Gen Z this year, again, because of prices, but also the sustainable reuse thing. They called it Thriftmas. And there were a lot of people who said, I'm not buying anything new for Christmas this year. I'm shopping on a leaner budget, and I'm going to find cool stuff that already has had a life, and I'm going to give those things. It used to be unheard of. We used to be dead as a doornail the couple of weeks between Thanksgiving and right before Christmas in the antique malls, because everyone was afraid to buy something old for someone. Oh, well, it's used. Oh, what if they don't like it and I can't take it back? And now people, they get it. So I'm very excited about that. When I started this channel, I was really concerned. One of the big reasons I started the channel is I thought we've got to talk about this stuff with people so that people who love this can pass on information to new people who want to be interested in this, and so that younger generations won't just throw all this stuff away. And now we're seeing that happening, and it's just really great to see the interest. So, oh, hello, Udalali. Speaking of a young person who likes vintage and gets it, you came just at the right time. Unfortunately, you also came right at the end. And yes, I had a record month in one of my malls too. It was very exciting. So anyhow, if there's any other questions or comments or anything, please put them in and I'll be glad to hang out with you. I usually do a long, uh, wow, your shop was way up. Yep, I bet. Um, I will be glad to answer any comments or questions. I'm going to put the outro on, but it lasts about 4 minutes. But if any of you have any questions right now while we're all still here, please drop them in the comments and I'll be glad to talk with you. We will have our next level 3, and we leave these up. I think that you all can watch it afterwards if some of you came in late. You can certainly watch it again. Hi, Sarah. Oh, Happy New Year. Great to see you too. Yes, I'm afraid we're just wrapping up right now, but you can watch again. We leave it up for a replay. And this was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. And we will. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for everything that you've done for me in 2025. And I can't wait to get out and see a bunch of you in the new year. And cheers. And cheers. This is water. We'll work on something more medicinal. I really enjoyed the chats too, and thank you so much.